Welcome to The Deepest Cut, a podcast about the movement from painful experiences to meaningful music. I'm your host, Matt Connor. Bright sadness is the kind of phrase that stops you cold. It's two words that shouldn't belong together, but somehow they name something deeply true. It's the paradox of holding sorrow and hope in the same breath. And when Jill Phillips brought it to the writing room, Ben Shive says he knew it was special. Now, at the time, Ben was reeling, newly diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, recovering from a personal crisis, and immersed in the study of trauma. The phrase landed like a lifeline. It became his way to name the ache while still reaching for grace. Now, Ben's no stranger to helping others give language to the deepest parts of life. He's written with and produced albums for the likes of Stephen Curtis Chapman, Sandra McCracken, Andrew Peterson, The Grey Havens, Colony House, so many others, all while also crafting his own acclaimed solo work. On this episode of The Deepest Cut, I sat down with Ben to unpack the making of the song Bright Sadness, a co-write with Jill from her 21 album Deeper Into Love. Ben shared how songwriting isn't where he processes pain, it's what happens after. Once the grief is named, his real work begins. Rhyme, structure, precision, honesty. It's a conversation about the discipline of hope and the courage to stay open to sorrow without letting it have the final word. Here's my conversation with Ben Shive on The Deepest Cut. Hello and welcome to The Deepest Cut. I'm your host, Matt Connor. Today's episode, I'm here with, I should have asked you this beforehand. By the way, Ben Shive, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I want to introduce you in some way, but I feel like I was actually thinking I wanted to use the word wizard, but then I didn't want to embarrass you or make sound doofusy in any way. But it's like, oh yeah, he plays with all these people. He writes for all these people. He's got his own songcraft, producer over here. You work with so many people that people love. And then I'm also thinking that maybe people don't even know about your own catalog, or at least some people won't. And I just thought, how do you put all that together in a succinct way? And then I was going to say some sort of musical wizard. And then here I am making it even longer than that. Anyway, how do you normally, what do you normally tell people?
Wizard is fine. We were we were in Gatlinburg yesterday, and we went to a putt-putt place, and there was an actual there was a woman dressed as a wizard. So as soon as you said that, I pictured her, and that's actually how I'm dressed right now too. No, I don't know. Yeah. I guess I usually just go, I guess I'm a producer probably first and a songwriter probably right in there. That's how I spend my time.
Well, we're so glad to be chatting today. It's good to see you. And, we want to get into the song that you chose for this episode. It's called Bright Sadness. And I want to get into the context of the writing of that and the circumstances around, obviously the lyrics and the context of it all. But this is a song that's not your like if people have heard it, it's Jill Phillips. It's on a Jill Phillips release.
Yeah.
You wrote it or wrote with her.
I wrote it with her. Yeah.
Right. And I guess I want to start there in this podcast where we talk about craft, the background of songs, and specifically painful or difficult material. Here you are choosing something that actually involves someone else. And I wanted to start there with this idea of as you, as a writer, deal with your own painful, sad, difficult material. Have you found that it's hard to invite people into that, to process that with you? Has that been a help to have that? I wondered how much you've wrestled with that because you've been at this so long. I'm assuming that maybe your relationship with that has changed.
It's not hard to invite somebody into it. I think it probably helps that my family of origin doesn't really have a lot of embarrassment about sharing whatever the thing is. My mom, especially, you know, if she's thinking about something, she's not going to be too choosy about who she talks about it with. And so I think I probably have that a little bit where I'm not real like reticent, you know, about emotional things. And I mean, really, I have a pretty low tolerance for small talk, and so I guess for me, it's like if that's what's if that's what's going on, then that's probably what I want to talk about. So it definitely. That said, I'm not totally unchoosy about who I would want to write that kind of material with, but also I probably wouldn't want to write very much with somebody that I wouldn't want to go to that place with. I don't write a lot of just, you know, pop music. I don't write a lot of just music that's just for fun. I don't write none of that, but it's not like the first place that I go. And so, yeah, probably if I was going to write with somebody at all, it'd be with somebody that I want to talk about my real life with. And so, yeah, you know, Jill is a great example of that. Yeah, Jill is somebody who, when we wrote this song, it was part of a project that was going to contain a lot of material that lived at this depth. And Jill, I suppose, had maybe just kind of gotten her certification or license as a therapist. And I had just been diagnosed with MS, and I had just been through a really a pretty horrific interpersonal thing that I can't really talk about here. But it had me pretty raw, and so yeah, so we were in a good place to write that kind of material together because I think we were thinking about some of the same things.
You mentioned these things that you going through the time that you're in, the things you're going through, working with Jill in that way. Is songwriting a pretty typical outlet for you to process some of these experiences?
I wouldn't exactly put it that way. I think okay, so yeah, this is getting into my personality that I like. My Shive is a German name, and I actually, I mean, we've been in the United States for, you know, since the 1700s, but I just think it's still in there. This Teutonic thing where I don't know, I don't think of music as the place where I feel my emotions. I think I feel my emotions outside of music. And then once I get to the songwriting part, it's craft for me. But I like to write about the emotions that I've felt. So I don't, does that make sense? It's, the songwriting isn't where I pour my heart out. I feel my feelings somewhere else. And then I go, you know what? I think that would be worthy of a song. And then by the time I'm writing, I'm not that I never feel emotions when I'm writing. I certainly do. But by the time I get to the writing, I'm usually in a more analytical place about my emotions. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting emotion. I bet other people, I think that's part of the human experience. I think that's part of the script. Here's how it divides into verses and choruses. And I'm more in that, you know, puzzle working space when I'm writing.
Does that change the feel of the song, the ethos of a song? Because maybe where some songwriters would come to it and like pour that emotion, sort of like like even maybe the discovery of that emotion as part of the songwriting. Do you think that comes through? And then do you think your analytical approach changes that and that comes through?
There's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I don't think crafted words are less powerful than spontaneous emotional words. They just might be differently powerful. Um, I I find that in the process of doing the craft part of it, in the process of, I think of it as like filling out the worksheet. I have this part of my of my craft that is, I think of it as stepping on every word, just like you stand on every word and see if it bears weight. And the way that you make them bear weight is you make sure, I mean, you make sure that it's the most, you know, the most accurate word, but also it's kind of like, does it relate to any of the other words in the line, or at least in the verse, in terms of assonance, alliteration? And if it doesn't, then can I change it to make it do that? And so my my process of writing is very much like you write the line and then you go, okay, which word, how can I flip the words so that it bears as much assonance and alliteration as I can make it. Because I think that when you've done that, the line just feels like it's always been there, like it's always existed. And I am always amazed at how that process, or even if forget about stepping on every word and making sure it does that, like sometimes if the way that I find the line is just by seeing how many syllables from the last line I can rhyme this line with, sometimes if I let that determine what the line is, I write the line and I go, oh my gosh, I just learned something about this emotion or about this experience. Like I've been surprised at how often just doing the craft actually makes you go, whoa, the truth was in the craft. Yeah, it just kind of makes me think God made the world in wisdom, like that, like the way that he encoded things in the process of writing. I don't know. It just I think because I have the Holy Spirit in me, I think that's what happens often.
I love that, and I maybe you won't have a response to this because I'm talking about you, but I feel like in your songs, maybe what you're describing is I feel like there are so many moments in your songs where I could lift a couplet as just a quote in itself, as just like here's a statement that's so striking. And so when you're describing like the standing on every word, the really like working the craft in such a way that you're, like kneading the dough over and over again or whatever the analogy there would be. I feel like, oh, like you describing your process sounds so congruent with my own listening experience, which is beyond just the kind of listening to the lyrics, but like even the ability to pull something out and just chew on it outside the music.
I love that. And that's, I think where one of my big heroes lyrically is Stephen Sondheim, and that's his deal. There's a great movie about him called Six by Sondheim. And like, he talks about just being essentially a puzzle worker. Like he actually collected puzzles and just was very fascinated with songwriting as puzzle working. And his lines are very much that way. And I think it's as much because of the craft as it is because of the depth of who he was.
Sure. Favorite Sondheim, by the way?
It depends. I do love Into the Woods. I think Into the Woods is just overall wonderful. And I also love Sunday in the Park with George a lot. And then I recognize that Sweeney Todd is absolutely brilliant. Sweeney Todd isn't like everyday listening because it's so dark, but it's really incredible. It's really incredible.
I was just curious on that note. Obviously, I want to talk about Bright Sadness, but I want to go back to something you said because I think you had a really great instinct and I want to pull it out because I think it's worth discussing here. You mentioned earlier in sort of the crafting of the song, you said, if I feel something and I think that is part of the human experience, like it was almost like if you go through something, feel something, experience something, and it seems relatable, connective tissue, then that is what you choose to write about. Is that like a very intentional thing? Is that part of the filter? I was hoping you could go there and maybe define that or suss it out.
Yeah, well, I guess the other, I don't know if this is going to get us closer to the point or make the point broader, but another way that it often happens is if I have an experience and I think of a phrase related to that experience pops into my head, or I hear it or I say it and I go, oh, that's a title. Like Sandra McCracken and I have a project called The Still Point, and there's a song on there called What Is, and I just had the title What Is forever, and What Is was attached in my mind to the acceptance of things as they are, and I think that the fact that it could have a title that's so, succinct, 2 syllables, and it attaches to something that I think is, of course, yeah, we're all dealing with that. Like, am I willing to accept my life as it is and not as I wish it was? Yeah, I do think with some of the things we're talking about, some of the things related to sadness, or hard things, I feel like if you can identify it in the life of Christ, a sadness that he experienced, then that's probably enough of key part of the script of being alive that it's worth writing about, like betrayal, being misunderstood, being abandoned by your friends when you needed them, pain.
Yeah.
If it's one of those things, then it's probably, if you're a Christian, you're being made like Jesus. And if you're experiencing being abandoned as a Christian, then it's part of the script of becoming like Jesus. And so it's probably worth writing about.
I love that almost as a segue here, because Bright Sadness is a real invitation into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the from the opening lines, this asking this bright sadness or other ways in which it's addressed to sort of have, you say, have your way in me, Jill sings. And so, I know even for me personally, like the last month has included some real, like, some health scares and some real, like, things we're having to face down right now, some other interpersonal stuff with our son, whatever. And not to get into that, but I'm just thinking, like, when I'm listening to this song, I'm like, no, no, no.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking the opposite. Like, oh, Bright Sadness had the other way. Last year was already bad enough, and yet realizing, like, it is what you're saying. Like, if I have to drink from this cup, let me, like, let's do it all the way.
Well, I'm right there with you. Like yeah, I hadn't thought about this song in a while. And when we landed on this one, it was helpful for me to think about the lyric and remember that we said that we wrote that, because yeah, I've certainly got some things that came down the pike for me in the last couple of years that I'm still just not happy about. And hearing that lyric and going, okay, at one point I invited that kind of sadness to do what it was supposed to do. So, okay, I need to submit myself to this thing. I actually do. I feel like that when I heard that lyric again, it reminded me of this other song I wrote called "Listen" that ends with this verse that's like, "My bones are all bells to be rung, my nerves are attuned and tight. So come knock the air from my lungs out over the cords in my windpipe. My skin pulled taut like a drum. I am bracing myself for the strike, waiting like a song to be sung, hidden in the cleft of the night." And it seemed like a similar kind of invitation. It's like the Lieutenant Dan tied to the mast thing, like, come on. Like, but maybe it's a different thing because that's defiant. This is more like all right, let's have at it. If this is what we're doing, God, if this is how you work, let's, I guess, just get it over with. Actually, it's funny because I was thinking about this podcast as in the shower last night, and I do this thing where I take cold showers, but it's like intermittently cold. So I stand there under the hot water, and I think I'm not gonna take a cold shower tonight. There's no way. And then at some point I'll just go, here we go, just like turn it cold, and I'm like, it's like, bring on the pain, Anyway,
is this the cold shower?
yeah, the cold shower is the pain. Yeah.
Finish that phrase you said, but I do that because.
Oh, I do it because I think it's good for me. I feel good after a cold shower. I feel invigorated, and I like some of my symptoms related to my MS feel better afterward. And so I just, you got to go through it.
Do you remember writing this with Jill and any conversation around even that idea of inviting in and, like, having that kind of relationship with suffering and the way you wanted to frame it?
I sadly, the one drawback about talking about this song is I don't remember all of it, but I do remember we were on the Behold tour and we found a Sunday school classroom or something and wrote the first verse or so of this song. And I think that she brought the idea in. I think she had gotten that phrase "bright sadness" from somewhere. You might have to have another episode to ask her where it came from. She brought it in, and then I think we went from there.
Was it hard for you to relate to that, or was that your attitude, like with some of these things that you've mentioned?
Yeah, it was my attitude. Yeah. The thing about MS, about that diagnosis is, like, I've been pretty fortunate so far with my MS, and I'm really grateful for that. When I was diagnosed, I was feeling worse than I am now. But the experience of that diagnosis was like, when you're expecting a baby, you get a nursery ready and you buy the stuff and you decorate the room. It was like that MS diagnosis was like finding out I was pregnant with grief. It was kind of this like, okay, it's time to nest for suffering. Because, and thankfully, thankfully a lot of that hasn't landed. And I may be very fortunate. It may not land in the way that I, was preparing myself for, but definitely after that diagnosis, I went, okay, let's build a new room in my heart for, all kinds of bad outcomes. And so I was not reluctant to write this because I think that's where I was. I was kind of going like, all right, if this is going to enter my life, I want to receive it as, as a welcome guest.
Which is hard to do, but ultimately where you want to meet it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's easier said than done. And again, I mean, it's like I've had a fairly easy time of it so far. So like those are big words, but we'll see how I do. I'm reading Job right now, so it's just so it's like you can say those things until you're in it, and then it's just a different thing, right?
Yeah. In terms of anything else in the song, I mean, do you, like, any other like memories come to mind? Any prompts or thoughts that you want to say about it?
Well, I think we found the chorus line together probably in that first writing session. If I have to fall, then let me fall deeper into love. And yeah, I want suffering to generally make me softer and like, and I recognize that, like, actually that's what's part of what's good about hearing this right now is I think some suffering that I've been through recently is still, there's that middle place. There's another set of lines on that same EP at the end of a song called "Things Aren't Always What They Seem" that Jill and I also wrote, and it's things aren't always what they seem. Might be Jill and I were both going through some interpersonal things at that time, and I think that song in general is maybe her story a little bit more than mine until the last bit, and the last bit is my story, and it's I'm asking myself, what did I learn? What to let in, what to take in, and what to let burn. When I tried to fix it, I took it too far. There's such a risk in dropping your guard. I'll take them both with me, serpent and dove, knowledge and innocence, wisdom and love. That I'd come out stronger. This goes back to Jill. This is Jill's line that I'd come out stronger. I couldn't believe, but things aren't always what they seem. And that describes that place where you're still in the suffering and angry about it. And I mentioned Job. One of the things that I like about Job is that it presents wisdom as I am learning wisdom to be, which is not always pretty, not neat, and not always resulting in a clean outcome for you. And, as I was writing those lines, I just rattled off. I was on the tail end of an interpersonal thing that what I kept saying in my prayers was, what did we learn here, God? Like, what am I supposed to learn from this? Am I supposed to learn that I need to be more guarded and that I need to like trust people less, and that, and that may not be exactly how I'd put it, but a little bit, yeah, was the answer. Like something like that. There might be a better way to put it than that, but something like, yeah, don't give your pearls to swine. Don't give your heart to everybody. If you're listening to this and you think I'm talking about you, I didn't just call you a swine. I'm just I'm just thinking of, what, like, yeah, who do we give what to? So, I think that's where you live when you're going through the suffering, and maybe even shortly after, or maybe for a while after, but hopefully there comes this point where you look in the mirror and you like what you see again. You look in your eyes and you like what you see. And I think that I had a season like that recently where I kind of like I watched the dust settle on something, and I looked in the mirror one day, and I looked in my eyes, and I was like, oh, I look sadder than I used to, and I was like, and I like it. I think like it didn't feel wrong; it felt right. It felt like I should be sadder than I used to be, and and more joyful. You know, both. Um, and I I was with Sandra McCracken, and she said something similar. She said, I drew a picture of myself the other day, and my eyes looked old and older. I don't want to put words in her mouth. She probably said it more eloquently like that than that. Um, but she's, you know, she expressed a similar, like, it felt right. And so I resonated with that, and said my, you know, what I had just said to you. And she said, now just imagine what it will be like to look in Jesus' eyes after all that he has suffered, and all that he has suffered with, you know, not only his own sufferings, but also all the people that he's walked with. And to look in his eyes, there must just be such depth of all of it, you know, sadness and joy, like mirth and solemnity and all the, you know, all these things.
Ben, I would love for you to just take. I mean, we've talked about the song so much. I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, "Let me hear." Like I've never heard it before, or to listen anew. If you would, why don't you take us into it?
Sure. Hey, if you're just tuning in, I'm Ben Shive. This is a song I wrote with Jill Phillips called Bright Sadness. It's on an EP that we made together that I produced with her a few years ago called Deeper Into Love.
Oh, bright sadness, luminous darkness, do your work in me. On the vine of lonely affliction, bear the fruit of peace. If this is my cup, then let me drink it all. If I have to fall, then let me fall deeper into love, deeper into love. Oh, deep knowing, born out of suffering, what a price to pay. And if this journey will only break me, make another way. If this is my cup, then let me drink it all. If I have to fall, then let me fall deeper into love, deeper into love. I am not alone here in my grief. I know you have not forsaken me. deeper into love.
You've been listening to The Deepest Cut, part of the Rabbit Room Podcast Network. Audio production and theme music by Isaac Vining. Logo and identity work by Meg Cook. The Deepest Cut was created and hosted by me, Matt Connor. Thank you so much for listening.